Your Excellency, Minister Al-Bawardi, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good morning, Assalamu alaikum. It is indeed my pleasure and privilege to moderate our third panel for the day, Optimizing Innovation, Overcoming Adoption and Integration Challenges. The topic, as the title suggests, is very wide-ranging indeed and encompasses various aspects related to unmanned systems. So it is a challenge, especially for a civilian like myself, to cover everything in a very short amount of time. But fortunately, we have with us today a panel of distinguished speakers with impressive experiences and backgrounds to help us answer some of the questions related to adopting and integrating these systems into modern militaries. It is my pleasure to welcome Major General Sean A. Gainey of the United States Army. General Gainey is the Director and Joint Counter Small Unarmed Aircraft Systems Office and the Director of Fires Headquarters at the Department of the Army. General Gainey started his military career in Germany and is no stranger to this part of the world, having deployed his battery to Bahrain in support of Operation Southern Watch and serving as Battalion Executive Officer and later Brigade Operations Officer while deploying in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. General Gainey is a graduate of Georgia Southern University and holds a master's degree in personnel management from Central Michigan University and another MS degree in national security and resource strategy from Dwight Eisenhower School of National Security. General Gainey, thank you for being with us. We also have with us today, remotely from Singapore, Brigadier General Lau Boon Ping. General Lau is currently the Chief of Staff, Air Staff in the Republic of Singapore. Throughout his career, General Lau has held various command and staff appointments in the Air Force and other ministries. He took over as commander of the UAV Command in 2017 and as commander of Participation Command in 2019. He's a graduate of Cornell University in electrical engineering and holds a master's degree from Stanford and an MBA from MIT. Welcome, General Lau. It is also my pleasure to introduce retired Brigadier General James Clough, who is the founding partner and Chief Operations Officer of SOAR Beyond in the United States. General Clough was one of the first senior leaders in the remotely piloted aircraft community at the United States Air Force. A graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, General Clough held various posts within the Air Force during his 30-year career, including numerous combat deployments. General Clough. Last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Walid Benzarti, the Director for Innovation, Research and Technology and Thales Group in France. Dr. Benzarti holds a doctorate degree in microelectronics as well as an MBA. He has held posts in several international public and private institutions. He is the author of several scientific papers and regular speaker at various conferences and summits. Welcome, Dr. Benzarti. Thank you for being with us. Let me start with a very general question regarding the definitions, the terms that we are talking about. Are we all on the same page when we deal with these terms? Because for me, as a person from the media, who are not very well informed when it comes to these things, we use these terms interchangeably. We say unmanned systems, we use autonomous systems, we use semi-autonomous systems. Even in Arabic, we say al-anzima ghayr al-ma'hula or al-anzima al-dhatiyya. Do all these things mean the same thing? Are you all on the same page when it comes to these definitions? I know in the State Department you have a glossary, clear definitions of these terms. are you all in line with the industry when it comes to using these terms? Briefly.
Yeah, I believe so. When talking unmanned, autonomous type systems, when you look at the role that I'm in the counter unmanned system business, which means I'm looking to defeat this technology. So when I look at unmanned or autonomous type systems, I'm looking at them pretty much all the same. Now, I know there may be some separate definitional references that some of my colleagues on the panel will highlight from a integration and implementation of this type of technology. But from my perspective, I see it pretty much the same when looking to defeat the target set.
Cliffy?
Well, I think within the community, we all share a common perception of the definition. But when you step outside the community and we start talking about developing trust and developing regulatory procedures that the last two panels have talked about, we have to understand and we have to get the populace to recognize that an unmanned system that we've been using for 20 years that has a pilot in the loop all the time is different than an autonomous system that we will program and release, and it will go make its own decisions over a battlefield. Those are two different things, and I think this room understands that, but getting the public and getting the uninformed understand that so that we can make smart regulatory decisions is very important.
Dr. Benzarti?
Yes, definitely. The question is very important since I think we are not really on the same page regarding what we say about autonomous or unmanned. The thing is that a machine remains a machine, and it depends on the level of smartness that the machine has that it will make it autonomous or unmanned or whatever. So the thing is that regarding all of the equipments that are on these machines and what the equipments are able to do and where is the man in the loop, I mean the decision making on how to use this machine will make that this machine is autonomous or it is just unmanned or whatever other definition that we have.
Okay, General Lau in Singapore, would you like to add anything to this point?
Yes. Yeah, hi. Good morning, everyone. Actually, I think it's very useful to make the distinction in definition between unmanned and autonomous, because only in recent times, the autonomous nature of these unmanned vehicles are what is causing some upheaval and also change the way the militaries look at these systems. Because I think we need to understand, I think like what James said, unmanned systems have been in the militaries for many, many decades. Like for example, in the RSAF, we started operating unmanned systems like 30 over years ago. So, but what has changed in recent time is the autonomous nature, the automation that allows for example, like what the panel previously discussed, where one operator can operate many different platforms. And how do you now integrate all those things into the manned world? So that is the key difference today.
Well, unmanned to me is a bit not very politically correct, but I'm not going to try to change that. You know, usually say unpersoned, I guess, but that's a different story. Let's hear briefly from all of you what you think the main challenges, the main problems that any defense organization would face once they decide to acquire these systems. What do they need to do in order to be able to fully acquire these systems in a very efficient and safe manner? General Gainey.
Yeah, I think the goodness of these panels and the way they were sequenced, a lot of the points have been brought out to this point right now. And to reemphasize some of those points with not dwelling in detail on them, I think we've highlighted the risk of the integration and the safety of the integration in adopting these type of systems within the force in a timely manner. And we also looked at the trust and confidence that was highlighted several times throughout this panel. The soldiers having a trust and confidence in a system to perform as advertised, and later I know we'll talk about how do we get around to changing that culture and attitude. And then finally, the cost piece of it, of taking a force that you already have and that you're putting a lot of money into it, and then you add in additional unmanned type of capability. You have cost is going to be a concern when looking at scaling of that capability moving forward.
Cliffy, I guess the question, why do we acquire these systems, probably answer a lot of the questions related to challenges, how to integrate, how to adapt. Do we acquire these systems to save lives, like Dr. Ulama said this morning? Do we acquire these systems to save costs? Do we acquire them to be able to operate in a more effective manner? I think the reason why defense establishment acquire these systems probably answers a lot of the questions that we are dealing with.
I think you're right. I think, though, we have to, Simon Sinek writes a book about start with why. The unmanned revolution has come, and there seems like there's almost this knee-jerk reaction to my neighbor bought one, I have to have one too. But the question, that mentality drives a problem with the integration. Why are you buying an unmanned system? Why does your country need an unmanned system? Is it to provide a capability you don't have already? Well, okay, that integration challenge may be an issue here. Is it to replace an existing capability? Because that integration challenge is different if you're going to take an existing force and change it and give it new technology and new capability and new mission. Is it to save cost? Is it to save people? All those questions are vitally important, but a country can't fully successfully integrate unmanned technology until they ask the why question first, and they have to solve the why question for themselves.
Dr. Benzerti, would you like to add anything to that?
Definitely. I think that the main thing that unmanned system can bring in the defense industry is that they are supposed to save lives instead of sending real people, and there is the risk of death. When you send unmanned systems, you are preventing these types of deaths. However, I mean, what the defense industry and the customers are always requesting is about safety, 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 security, security, security. So I think that what has been mentioned earlier by His Excellency Major General Al-Jabri on that the technology is going faster than the CONOPS is really true. The thing is that the technology is not enough. You need also to understand what to do with this technology. And so I think that the work between the technology people, but also the CONOPS, I mean the military and the end users, is really important in order to understand, are we really needing these systems? And are they mature enough in order to be able to perform as we are expecting from them? And the third dimension is, of course, definitely the man in the loop. I mean, who is taking the decision at the end? Because in the defense industry, in most of the countries, I mean, when you are having death tolls and we are having any malfunctioning or breakdowns in the systems, you cannot afford to say, no, it's the machine that breaks. That's not enough. So we need to take into account all of these dimensions in order to say, yes, we need these unmanned systems, or they are not yet there.
General Gainey, what do you think? The point that General Al-Jabri brought, and Mr. Benzerti also, the technology is advancing at a much faster pace than the ability of the defense community is capable of handling. Is that a true, an accurate description?
Well, I'll take it from another perspective. I'm here representing the Joint Counter-UAS Office, which means I take a different look at, well, we're all here highlighting the greatness of autonomy and unmanned systems. I have to look at it from a different perspective of how the adversary or a threat will take this technology and employ it and use it against us. So as we talk why and integration of technology, this technology is being integrated and proliferated at a rapid pace that our adversaries are doing, and they're doing it without all of the challenges that we're talking about here today. For example, when we're talking challenges of cost, confidence, and safety in the system, they're not looking at it. So they're rapidly purchasing this stuff off the shelf, redesigning it, taking the great technology that's being developed for good, and then employing it. And then it's my responsibility to figure out how to understand this technology that's being implemented and then leverage this same technology in the systems that I'm developing to counter this capability. So when we talk AI, machine learning, autonomy, those same principles are valid for the counter systems to, autonomously have a system or semi-autonomous that can detect a target through some form of AI, track that target, and ultimately defeat that target. Because when we start talking things like swarms and in large amount of threat sets and technology making it move faster or slower and smaller, AI is going to be a key component to the counter-UAS fight also.
I'm going to come back and ask you about this because, I want to take opportunity of you being here with us to talk about the how to counter these systems. Because like Minister Al-Bawardi this morning, these things are a clear and immediate threat to us in this region. And we really would like to know, at least as a journalist, I would like to know what is being done in order to counter these systems effectively.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack the panel.
No, I'll come back to you.
Just excited
I'll
about
come
what I
back
do.
to you for this. Cliffy, I'm sure there are organizational changes that need to be adapted in order to accommodate these new systems. What kind of organizational changes need to be done? What kind of cultural changes that need to be done? Doctrinal maybe changes? What does the defense industry or the defense establishment need to do in order to have these systems employed effectively within?
So having watched, and I will speak strictly from an air perspective, having watched the U.S. Air Force struggle for 20 years to integrate a capability that they hadn't planned to integrate, I've had a ringside seat to that. And I will say for the defense leaders in this room, if you are serious about integrating unmanned capabilities into your services and into your country, it starts with you. The senior leadership of an organization has to buy in and make the hard decisions that we're going to stop doing things this way and we're going to start doing them this way in order to integrate these capabilities. I saw too many times, and I suspect it's probably the same in the Army, it's the same in the Navy, that the unmanned system was the new shiny thing, and there was this desire that I have to have it, but I really don't want it because in many ways it threatens the way we've done business for hundreds of years or dozens of years or generations. So that threat to how we've always done business has to be overcome, and it starts with senior leaders making the hard cultural decisions and organizational decisions and budgetary decisions that says, yes, this capability is important to our nation, we are going to integrate it, and I might have to give up something over here to have the money to buy this capability, but this will make me stronger and better and more capable down the road.
General Lau in Singapore, changing the culture, especially in large organizations, can be a very difficult thing, especially if there is a lot of bureaucracy involved. Changing the old things is not an easy thing. How do you look at this, and how do you deal with these challenges?
Yeah, indeed. So like you said, cultural change is an issue. But of course, I think most people in the military are practical in the sense that when you do build the use of these unmanned platforms into the CONOPS, they will gradually come around to seeing its utility when you participate in exercises, for example, and they will be able to appreciate the value that these platforms bring to the table, actually. So that's one aspect. It takes time, years and years of leadership emphasis, like what the General Lau was saying, and to get the buy-in necessarily from the internal stakeholders. I would just add that process-wise, there's also a need to make sure that the people in the military are able to appreciate the changes that these new platforms will bring about. And in doing so, we need to be very clear-minded about the differences between these platforms and the current ones they have in their inventory. Because, for example, when you bring in an unmanned platform, what does it mean to the airworthiness assessment, for example? What does it mean for training the operators, for example? Because, for example, in Singapore, our UAV pilots are not rated pilots. They are actually recruited off the streets because we recognize the modern UAV systems are a lot more autonomous and they don't require the kind of piloting skills that the manned pilot require. So there are a lot of these considerations that the management and leadership must put in place for people to better appreciate the changes that unmanned platforms will bring to the organization. And over time, they will be able to gradually accept them, and the culture will start to shift.
General Gainey, at the leadership level, what changes need to be made in order to better accommodate these?
Well, I'll add another point to that. I think, I believe it was Air Commodore Hicks that made the comment about the younger generation. In watching the younger generation with this technology, I think the culture has already changed at that level. They see autonomy, unmanned system as an opportunity to make things easier. So when I would be part of exercise, operator in a loop type exercise, I would see the young pilots actively involved with industry on how to make it better and how we can do things differently. From the leadership aspect, I firmly believe from some of the action of the leadership, I'll speak within the Army perspective, is that modernization is being driven by the senior leaders of the Army because we have no choice. The way the threat is evolving, we have to modernize. And when I say modernize, look at things like AI and autonomy and learn to shift the organization to embrace that type of technology in the way we're moving forward with how we're going to do our command control systems and future operations that's going to incorporate some form of AI or semi-autonomy moving forward, because you have to, because the threat is driving the change in culture also.
Cliffy, the word ethics and morals were brought up several times today. There is definitely an ethical side to all of this. Some people say that because these systems are unmanned, they are probably easier to engage in more hostile situation, easier than regular or traditional systems. What changes need to be done in the way we think about this in order to be able to use these systems effectively on the one hand, but also to adhere by the ethical and moral standards that are known?
So in many ways, these systems are no different than other systems we've had for generations. They're another tool that the commander can use to achieve his or her objectives. If you go back in history, the discussion of the introduction of some key technological weapons or some key advances in weaponry changed, I won't say it changed the nature of warfare, it changed how the tactics and some of the procedures of warfare. The introduction of the longbow in the Middle Ages was, and if you read some of the history, was seen as unethical and not honorable because I no longer stand face to face to my enemy. I now hide from a distance, and that was seen as unethical. The airplane, the strategic bombing was seen as unethical early on by some leading practitioners and theorists. So this is not new ground we're plowing here in terms of the ethics of weaponry. I think we need to look at our past to see how we integrated these new capabilities as we bring them to the future. The ethical discussion isn't new. It's just what are we talking about, what technology are we talking about that we have to discuss. And because of that, I think it becomes an educational, partially educational. The use of an MQ-9 to strike a target is no different than the use of an F-16. They both involve an airplane, they both involve a weapon, they both involve intelligence to develop the target, they both involve a human making the decision to drop a weapon. The next iteration is now going to be on the autonomous side, and I think it was covered a couple times earlier in the panels, is how do we ensure that we have the same rigor and discipline in our attack processes and our execution processes that we have with manned assets? How do we ensure that we have that with unmanned assets? That's the key to solving the ethical dilemma, is showing our countries, our people, that the same rigor that goes into, I go in as a man selecting a target, I'm going to program that same rigor into my system that's going to go select the target autonomously, 20 years down the road.
General Lau, what do you think? Do we need to incorporate changes in the rules of engagement and the training and everything in order to meet this ethical side of the equation?
I have to agree with General Clough because there isn't really much of a difference because today, I think even in modern warfare, a lot of our manned jets are also dropping weapons far away from sight. So there's really not much of a difference today. But in the near future, we do have to consider how to maybe incorporate human fail-safe, for example, into autonomous systems to continue to make sure that these autonomous systems are acting on human will and not by themselves. So I think the problem has not yet hit us today, although it is good to start thinking about it. And I think there has been quite a fair bit of a discussion as well as debate in this discipline on AI.
Dr. Benserti, how important is it to involve the end user from the early stages of development of these systems in order to be able to accommodate and adopt and integrate these systems in a much smoother way, in a less time? Does the end user have to be involved early on?
Absolutely. I think that one of the major hurdles in order to integrate or adopt a new technology or a new product, I would say, or a new solution is, of course, the fact that most of the time people work in silos. So there are the people from the technology side, there are the people from the ConOps side, and they do not necessarily talk to each other. So we need to break the silos. We need to have the end user, and when I say the end user, we need also to make a difference between who is buying the product and who is going to use the product. So the end user is different from the management who will buy the system. So we need to have this strong connection as early as possible. What we are used to do is to say, okay, I'm as a private company or industry in the defense sector, is to say, I'm going to develop a product, so it takes some time in order to maturate the technology, to make it safe, to make it secure, and so on, and to go to the customer and to try to convince the customer with the product. And the customer says, no, hey man, I'm not interested in this. This is not my objective. So you go back to your labs and you refurbish what you've developed. So if we are having the end user as well as the customer since day one and making short loops with the customer, that will be much more efficient rather than taking all of this time. And it's not only saving on efficiency, but it's also saving on time, and it's saving on funding. And the other thing is that we are talking about the connection with the end user, but we need also not to always reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you are having technology which is already off the shelf. We are having startups, we are having R&D centers, we are having academia which is providing disruptive technologies. So we need to work together with all of this ecosystem of innovation. So what I'm saying is that 1 + 1 can make 3. And so we need to create these types of synergies in order to prevent from losing time, losing funding, and at the end, providing the end user with a system that he won't be able to even understand.
General Gainey, I'm sure integrating these systems with existing systems is also a big headache from an operational point of view. I can imagine you have crowded battlefields, whether on air, on sea, on land. How does the organization deal with these things in order to have a smooth operation all over?
This sort of dovetails right off of the comment that was previously made. It actually starts with the requirement. So if we are sharing our requirements with the industry, and then the end users understand it, that allows us to integrate these systems on the front end of the development. Something we've had challenges with in the past, but we're trying to work in the future. And having the luxury of now being the director of the Joint Counter-UAS office, we're able to, as we develop capability, share the requirements with industry, come in with those requirements, and then lay out your plan to get there, and then come to one of our government-funded demonstrations in sort of as an incentive to work together in this process. And then as you develop, there's no surprises between the user and industry, and then the transition to that integration of that system is much smoother because you're building that up front in the process. And then that, as you move forward, then you're tweaking the integration as opposed to back-ending the integration after you've already developed the system. So that's how we have to move forward, because any other way will take too long to get where we want to get with integration of these.
Cliffy, would you like to
systems.
add anything on this, the overcrowdedness of the battlefield?
It's not going to get any better. But to a point General Gainey made earlier, and I think General Lau made, our young soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, Guardians, whatever term you use for your young troops, they'll integrate it. We see it all the time. Over Afghanistan, there were young combat controllers and JTACs and Army TAC officers who were taking manned assets and unmanned assets in the same 6 mile diameter circle and integrating 4, 5, 6, 10 flights of aircraft, all operating in the same place seamlessly, because we train to it. We practice it, and more importantly, we empower those younger troops to, hey, here's the problem you have to solve, go solve it. So I think tactically the integration will happen. I think operationally the integration can happen because we're so used to it. At least in the US, we started 25 years ago trying to integrate jointly, and we got success at that. And now within battlefields with new technologies, we're rapidly integrating because we train our folks well, we give them the tools they need to succeed. I think one of the integration discussions you're talking about is at the force level or at the strategic level, but I don't think the concepts are any different. You have to empower those that are going to make the decision. You give them the capability and you give them the power to integrate it in their battle plans. As General Lau said, you build a CONOPS. You train to it, you practice a little bit, and then you move forward. You can't be afraid to bring these capabilities, and I think that's one of the struggles we're going to see on the unmanned side, especially the autonomous side, is a fear of bringing them into a crowded space because some may not understand, well, how is it programmed? What's it going to do? It's too hard. I'm going to ignore it. Well, we need to embrace it. Be upfront. The developers, as the doctor was saying, the developers have to be talking to the end users. The users have to be telling the developers, I need this capability. That's how you integrate it, is by having that broken down silos are gone and we're talking amongst each other, and it's rapidly iterating, it's rapidly developing and making changes today to a program so that it can be integrated tomorrow.
Time is extremely important. General Lau, I would like to get your view on this, on the timeline thing. What about a timeline that we can expect in a practical manner from the point when we decide to acquire these systems to the point when we actually deploy them? What kind of timeline are we talking about?
Yeah, so with regard to timeline, it actually depends on the force, the military we're talking about, because there are two factors involved here, right? The complexity of the systems you're inducting, because for unmanned aerial systems, they come in different form, right, and sizes. They have the really big ones like your RQ-4 or your MQ-9s, to the very small ones, like the ones that General Gainey is trying to fight. So different kinds of systems will require a different length of time. But I think more importantly is how ready is the force to induct unmanned systems. So assuming you have very little experience in these systems, I would suppose that you will take some years to rejig the engineering systems, for example, and as well as the training system to be able to induct some of these systems, regardless of whether it's big or small. But however, most of the militaries today already have some kind of unmanned experience. If that's the case, then actually it is one should expect the induction of these unmanned systems to be a lot quicker than manned systems because of the nature the technology evolves. If you do not allow it to be operationalized in a short time, you will actually be left behind, and you'll find that the systems you are inducting actually get obsolete quite quickly before you can even field them. So I can't say what is the actual timeline, but suffice to say, it's best to start early to get the systems in place, and then subsequently things will be a lot faster as you induct newer and newer systems over the years ahead.
General Gainey, what do you think about this point? Because a lot of organizations, a lot of ministries in the world would like to obtain some of these systems, but they don't plan well, and like General Lau said, by the time they get them and they are able to use them, the technology is probably obsolete. What do we do about circumventing this problem?
I think his depiction of the way forward is pretty accurate, and not a whole lot to add to that. I would just say it's hard to put a timeline on it because of the challenges we highlighted up front have a play in that, whether it's risk, safety, confidence in the system, or the monetary, the fiscal aspect of it, all play a singular role in the length and time it takes to integrate in its technology. But I would tell you that if it's going to save lives on the battlefield and confidently complete the mission it's designed to, there's a will to get it on the battlefield sooner than later, but you just have to work through the challenge areas I highlight, but also the doctrinal pieces, the training pieces, because we don't want to field something where a soldier's not confident and has trust in it. And that all goes back to training, doctrinal development as keys moving forward.
Cliff, on the timing thing?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of unmanned programs should be we don't have to build the redundancies into them that we have to build into manned systems, because so much of the expense we sometimes spend on a system is to protect the person that's inside it. So we have, and rightly so, we have redundancies built in, we have fail-safes built in, we do significant testing to make sure it's safe for the person that's going to operate it. On the unmanned side, we should be expecting faster timelines because A, we don't have to do all that protection of the pilot in the cockpit, or in the case of a ship, the crew manning the ship, or the driver of a tank and a crewman in a tank. So there should be benefit there. But I also think that the whole notion of we're advancing technology in the 21st century at such a rapid rate, we should be able to advance the development at just as a rapid rate because of those other technologies that are available to help us do that. Digital engineering, rapid digital engineering, the use of computer algorithms to help in the design process. And to General Gainey's point, at a certain point, do we want a product that's 100%, or are we willing to take a product that's probably at 80%? So a couple of panelists earlier said that the military can be very conservative. I think collectively we are, but at the same time, the military is willing to take risks on a battlefield that means we could probably take an 80% solution and take it to the battlefield and versus waiting for the 100% solution.
Dr. Benzarti, I see you nodding your head.
No, actually, I'm completely okay with what you said, is that most of the time, of course, yes, the defense industry is quite conservative on this and not quite open also into cooperation with others and discussing with others, saying that, yes, we know what we do, we don't need anyone, and I think that this mindset needs also to be changed in order to cope with all of these new technologies. I mean, we are talking about AI also earlier this morning, and how to integrate AI. Is AI safe? I mean, we understand today that the defense authorities cannot accept AI if it is not explainable, if it is not trustable. So that's why we need, I mean, when you are having your iPad or your iPhone and it bugs, you just have to reboot. I mean, when you are using such kind of systems on the battlefield, you are not able to do the same. So you need to have this trust in the technology. But of course, I mean, you need to find a balance between the fact that you are very much conservative and saying, yes, I need something which is 100% safe and secure, and how you can ease your way in order to cope with all of these threats, because these threats are evolving. The question is not, would they come? They are already here. So you need to find a solution. You need to protect your airspace. And so if you are not coping with all of these technologies and making them mature them and to have them deployed on the battlefield or on the ground, I mean, you're completely lost.
And this brings us back to the issue of countering these systems, General Ghani. This is a major part of what you do.
Yes.
Tell us, how do you address this growing threat of these unmanned systems? What is being done right now to effectively deal with them?
Well, first thing we did is the Secretary of Defense looked at the Army and said, I want a service to be the executive agent for the counter-UAS problem set for the Department of Defense. So the Army took the mission on, and the Secretary of the Army named me the director of what we call the Joint Counter-UAS Office, Army organization, but the other services feed in. And essentially, my organization has been given the task to develop a joint material solution, to develop joint training and joint doctrine to be able to defeat the small counter-UASs. So what we did is we started with the strategy, because we knew we had to put a framework around this problem set and take it from an enterprise approach, because just like with some of the other challenges we've had in our past, you can't just attack it singularly. It's got to be a whole of department approach, from left of launch, meaning you got to find a way to disrupt the network, disrupt the supply chain, to all the way to the right side, where you have to have a way to defeat the actual threat with systems. And so through this process, and it's a challenging process, because when we looked at the strategy, it's, you have hazards, because all UASs aren't bad, which we highlighted several times as part of this forum. So you have hazards that may not be intended to be bad, but may infringe in some of the airspace, but accidental. And then you have your serious threats that we're really tailoring the systems to focus on. So we attack this from a system approach from the material aspect, essentially from a layered defense, and I'm missile defense background, as you highlighted, so this was a pretty difficult challenge, but an easy problem set for me to frame, because I frame it from the integrated air missile defense perspective, meaning you have to have layers of systems to be able to get after this type threat, because one system is not a magical system that's going to be able to do it all against these various threats, because you have small quadcopters to large cruise missile-like systems that we're focused on. And fortunately, we've been able to develop this system approach. Now we're rapidly working with industry through our requirements and our demonstrations to scale capability that meets our requirements and get them out, like we were highlighting earlier, maybe not 100% solution, but an 80% solution, do an operational assessment and make it better through that process. And that's how we're attacking this problem set on the macro level.
I imagine this requires major structural changes within the Department of Defense.
From an organizational perspective,
I mean, compared to, let's say, 10 years ago.
It did from an organizational perspective. We're still growing as an organization. We're still learning as a department. And, it started out as a material-focused effort, but our Secretary of Defense fully realized that we need to make this a broader scope problem set and look at also the left of launch aspect of it, so it's a holistic approach moving forward.
General Lau, on the training level, what kind of changes do we need to incorporate in training personnel in order to better adopt and integrate these systems?
I think first and foremost, with regard to training, I think we really need to understand what are the key differences between what we have and, like I mentioned just now, what we have today and what we are bringing in. Because I think a lot of times people may fall into the trap of doing the same thing, even though they're inducting new systems. And I think for unmanned systems, that is actually maybe quite detrimental. Because if you do that, you may not be able to utilize the unmanned systems to its full potential, for example. I think a lot of the advantages that unmanned systems bring to the table requires us to do a rethink of how we intend to operate them. Take, for example, I think the setup and how you intend to operate the machine. So instead of being in a high-G environment, for example, you'll be in a cabin looking at computers. So it means that actually the system lends itself very well to simulation, because whether you do it in simulation or for actual flight, actually for the operator is pretty similar. So this means that actually there's opportunity for you to shift more of the training towards simulation instead of burning the hours on the platform, for example. So if we are not able to appreciate the differences between an unmanned platform versus a physical platform, and then we will tend to lose these advantages of having such unmanned systems replace the functionality of a manned platform. And of course, as I mentioned just now, the degree of automation in the unmanned systems today also allows us to re-examine whether we need to spend like 1 to 2 years training a rated pilot before we put them onto the job of flying an unmanned aircraft, for example. Because actually these days, the controls of an unmanned system are quite straightforward. Typically, it's either point and click, for example, or just telling the aircraft where to go. And there are systems such as automatic takeoff and landing, for example, and that doesn't require a rated pilot to operate. So these are just two examples of how actually we do need to appreciate, as the technology starts to mature, what are these new things that they put on table that we can exploit and make the full use of, and then we can look at how we intend to train to achieve that effect.
All right, I think we have 2.5 minutes left. I would like to give you 30 seconds each to give an advice to the decision makers in an organization that are thinking about acquiring these systems. Briefly, General Gainey.
Yeah, only thing I would continue to highlight is as we take these systems and integrate them to our formation, continue to build the trust, and how you build the trust and confidence of the soldiers is with the training aspect that I highlighted in understanding that the foundation of the training piece will build that confidence in these systems, although they have dual use, as highlighted earlier, double-edged sword, good or bad. In the end, there's a lot of good uses for them, and it's my challenge to figure out.
Cliffy?
We have to get senior leaders, I think the younger generation trusts. Inherently, they trust in technology. My 10-year-old trusts in technology at a level that I don't, and I think I'm fairly open-minded to technology. But we need to get to a level of trust, and I think the best way to highlight it is a quick anecdote. As an F-16 pilot, we were losing airplanes with ground collision. Either a pilot was losing consciousness due to a high-G maneuver, was flying at night and got spatially disoriented, flying in the weather, got spatially disoriented, and crashed and hit the ground. And for years, like 14 years in a row, the safety system was telling us we need to put a terrain ground avoidance system, automated system in the airplane. The pilot force did not trust the technology and refused to accept it, refused to use it, refused to even bring it to bear. And in that 15-year period, 17 more men and women lost their lives because we didn't trust in a technology that has now been proven wildly effective at saving lives. So I think part of the lesson I would give is you've got to start to trust. And to General Gainey's point, to trust, you just have to go and start using it. You use it, you tweak it, you modify it, but you got to start. You just can't ignore it.
I'm borrowing 30 seconds, 15 for you, Dr. Benzarti, and 14 for Dr.
That's
General.
a real challenge. If I talk only about aerial drones, I think that just like we have built the civilian airplanes and industry, the drones are coming, and we will be using them for different usages. So we don't have a choice about this. So we need to cope with this. The only thing is that we need to protect the airspace. And if we want to protect this lower airspace that we are using, we need to have all of the people on board, because all of the CONOPS are to be invented. All of the technologies are to be put in place and to decide which technology to use. And of course, this cannot happen if we are only working in silos.
All right. General Lau, you have the last 15 minutes in Singapore.
Thank you. Thank you. Very quickly, I think I agree with what all the panelists have said. I'll just add on to say that the current momentum of fostering innovation in the militaries actually go in line with what we have discussed over the last half an hour or so. Because if the military is innovative and creativity is the name of the game, inducting some of these new advanced systems into the militaries should not be a problem, because people are able to wrap their heads around it and get used to the new technologies that they bring to the table. So I would say that I'll just end by saying that I think if not for the unmanned systems, but at least if you look at innovation and creativity within the militaries, they do help towards the induction of these systems in the future as well.
Thank you so much, General Lau in Singapore, General Gainey, Cliffy, Dr. Benzarti. Thank you all for being with us. Your Highness, Your Excellency, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this session. I'm sorry I took 1 minute and 40 seconds extra. Thank you so much for being with us.